Hi there, welcome to No Nonsense Whisky. My name's Vin PF, and on today's episode we've got something really special. Now, Boutiquey Whisky Company, they're a long-standing ally of mine. I've been working with them for a couple of years now, especially kind of like the overarching brands, Atom brands, whatnot, Master of Malt, all that kind of stuff. And I should say at the top of the show, they sent me this bottle over for review, but as always, I'll give you my full, honest opinion of this bottle and the rest of the stuff that they're working on. Without further ado then, let's get straight onto this. Now this here is part of a brand new series that's just come out. It's available right now, so as with all of these things, with Boutiquey, independently bottled stuff, things tend to go pretty quick. So if you're interested in any of that, then make sure you go and check out the links below, and you might be able to pick up some, maybe not. Now, it's a big series of USA, what they're calling baseball cards. Now you might have noticed from the bottle here, and I'll do a bit of a close-up in a moment of that so you can see it. The whole series is based around their kind of like baseball card vibe, you know, the kind of collectible vibe. There's all different kinds of distilleries. I've got a few samples down here as well of the different kind of vibes that are going on. So I'm probably going to do a different video on that. Maybe a sample Saturday. I haven't done one of them in a while, so look out for that in the next couple of weeks. But this one here, they sent me this one because after a conversation on the phone, I was sort of going on about I like kind of peated things. And this right here is a Kings County peated bourbon. And we'll go into that in a bit more detail in just a moment. But look at this thing. It looks great. Here's the bottle close up for you. Now you can see it's got the kind of like the, you know, the baseball card vibe about it, and they all look a little bit like this. You know, Boutiquey Whisky Company, if you're not familiar with them at all of their labels are really beautifully drawn, and they all have little nods and little details and kind of little Easter eggs in them that are kind of cool. Well worth checking out, especially if you're into the kind of indie whiskey market vibes, then they're definitely worth checking out because there's always good stuff. That's not to say that everything's going to be to your liking. As with all indie bottlers, you've got to pick and choose what you like, you know, and I'll say that for every indie bottler, you know, like some of the other ones I work with as well. Not everything is to my liking, but you know, if you like a particular distillery, and you see an indie bottler has done a kind of like a cask strength version of that distillery, then it's probably going to be worth trying. Okay then, let's get back onto this bottle and see what we've actually got in this particular one. A couple of stats that you might want to be aware of before we go any further is a very high ABV. This is 61.9%. It's about 90 quid in the UK, depending on where you shop, obviously. Again, there'll be some links in the description below so you can have a little look around. And it's worth noting that all of the Boutiquey whisky bottles are half litre, 500 millilitres, 50 cls, depending on what your preferred unit is. But yeah, so these are half litres, so you need to factor that into your kind of maths as well if you're interested in it. But we'll get into kind of value a little bit later on as well. A few key bits of information on here then. So it's only a limited run of 303 bottles, sorry. It's the peated malted barley, and this is batch 1 as well, as you might see up here if the camera zooms in. Yes. So, yeah, lots of cool stuff. Now, you might be wondering about a peated bourbon. It's not a very common thing to see. So you might be wondering why this has happened. Now, Kings County have had a peated bourbon out for a while now. In fact, it's something I have tried in the past. It's not something I've covered on the channel. I did cover a Kings County about sort of 5 years ago, so showing my age a little bit there, but it was their bottled in bond, and that was astounding, sort of 46%, and that was like a 200 milliliter bottle as well. I think they are selling full-size bottles now, which is good, but they're not cheap. They're not cheap, and you know, obviously neither is this, but again, we'll get into that. So this is a 2-year-old bourbon, peated bourbon. It's got a mash bill of 80% New York corn and 20% peated barley from Scotland. So that's kind of cool. It's peated to 15 ppm if you're interested in that sort of stats. Now that's the smoke level that was introduced to the barley during the malting process. So obviously during the kind of like creation process, the distillation process, that's not gonna be exactly as what it is on the back end, and that'll probably shine through when I do my tasting notes on this. But yeah, so if you're worried about a kind of like a really dirty peated bourbon, that's not what we're getting here. We're getting something kind of lightly infused with a bit of something zhuzhy, a bit of something extra, which can't lose really, I don't think. You know, and look at the colour on that bad boy. That's amazing. Look at that, 2 years old. Everything else about it is absolutely on par with bourbon. That's just the way things are. It meets all the criteria of bourbon, so it can still be called bourbon, blah, blah, blah. It's just using a bit of peated barley. In that case then, let's get onto the actual whiskey and see what we've got. Glass down here. And, you know, for once we can talk about the colour, because we know, being a bourbon, there is no added colour in that whatsoever. And that is just a dark treacle. It's an insanely good colour. We like that sort of thing. Let's get onto the nose and see what we've got. Oh, what a nose. Now, it's worth noting as well, this is a very high ABV, even for me. You know, I like high ABV whiskies, but with this sort of thing, you really need to treat it with a bit of respect. You need to leave it out on the side for a little bit, let it air out, and you certainly don't want to be sticking your nose. I'm not going to breathe in when I do this, but just to demonstrate, you're not going to want to be sticking your nose straight in the Glencairn, because that's gonna frazzle your old nose hairs, that is. But just a nice waft underneath. See what you get. For me, this is, I mean, obviously this is a high corn bourbon, so we're getting those kind of like typical notes. But for me, this is like a barbecued corn on the cob. You know, nice and kind of smoky barbecue. Lots of butterscotch, and like heaps of like those tannic notes. So it's like lots of roasted oak and that sort of thing. Really rich and luxurious. Let's get onto the palate. Oh. Now, obviously, it's huge. Now, for me, it doesn't quite taste 61.9%. I would have guessed probably high 50s. So we're talking semantics here, but it's still very high. But it's what I'm trying to get at is it's not quite as hot and heavy as the 61.9 would make it sound. Still accessible. It is big though. It is big. Lots to pick apart. For me, the first thing that I get from this is a really kind of a sweet cherry wood. You know, if you're into your barbecuing, I'm into my outdoor grilling a little bit, and I like to chuck on different kinds of wood to create some smoke. One of my favourites is cherry wood, and that creates a kind of like a sweetness in the kind of meats you're cooking, and that's what I'm getting off of this. A nice little kind of sweet cherry wood smoke, along with some really juicy kind of corn coming from it, some creamed corn. That's really shining through, so you get a kind of like a sweetness and a bit of juiciness. Then it all dries off a bit, and all that kind of rest of that barbecue smoke comes through. And when I'm talking about barbecue smoke, I'm not talking about the coals on fire or even the wood. For me, it's the kind of, you know, when you make a good quality barbecue, you'll put rub on your meat, you know, that kind of sweet, you know, like paprika and all that kind of nice stuff, sugary, like brown sugar all over your kind of meats. That's what I'm getting off of this, really kind of deep barbecued meats with a bit of cherry wood. Very good. It's very good. The finish, in terms of the finish, it's obviously huge. It's quite peppery. It sours out a little bit at the back end, which is no problem to me. That's the kind of vibes that I like. And there's a little waft of smoke throughout, but nothing too heavy. And that's kind of what I'm getting out of this. Although it's got peated bourbon on there, if it didn't have those words on there, it would just be probably just a little bit confusing about the origins of this. You'd probably be drinking it and going, there's something about this, but I can't put my finger on it. The smoky elements aren't like overexciting at all. You know, they're not there in your face. It just adds a little extra dynamic to it at the back end that I really enjoy. Now, I don't know if you can tell, but I really like this. I'm really into my bourbons. It's not something I've been covering a lot recently, as you can see from the collection behind, but that's because really good bourbon is quite hard to get hold of in the UK unless you know where to look or where to go, or if you've got a lot of money. And that's kind of the same with this. You know, this is expensive. You know, this is 90 quid for a half litre, so using a bit of quick maths, that's probably going to be a sort of 120, 130 pounds for a full-size bottle if it was expanded up. That kind of fits in well with what Kings County charge. You know, if you look at their standard bottlings, they're about that sort of 70, 80 quid for a full size for your 46% ABV. So yeah, you know, it's within that sort of realms of possibility for sure. I'm not going to hide behind it and say that this is, you know, like an insta buy for you guys, 100%, because it's probably just a little bit much for most people who aren't, you know, into bourbons, who aren't into kind of interesting things. That said, I know a lot of you are into your bourbons, and I know a lot of you are into exploration and things like that. And I think for that sort of experience, the mouthfeel experience from this is pretty on point. It's pretty on point with the current market. It's pretty on point with that. So yeah. That's where I'll leave you with that. You know, if you're interested in it, check out the links below. If you're not, then obviously it passes you by. You might be interested in some of the other ones that I've got coming up in the kind of, let's say, sample Saturday that I might do in a couple of weeks. So make sure you keep an eye out for that. But for me, an absolute winner. This one's going to have to stick behind a couple of guard whiskies at the back so that I don't drain this too quickly. That's what happens on my shelves, unfortunately. If I get a good bourbon in, they doesn't tend to last very long because I just want to reach for it all the time because I do love it. I do love it indeed. But yeah, again, massive thanks to you, Boutiquey and Atom, for sending this over to me and for the sample set that I'm going to go through in a couple of weeks. Let me know if you've tried any of these Boutiquey USA baseball card whiskies, and we'll have a little chat in the comments below. In any case, I'll see you again on more No Nonsense Whiskey videos in the future. Cheers.